Hello, my Logic people. Oh, we already have some people in the chat. Valentine is coming in hot with the 2 minutes early. I love it. Hey, Valentine, hope everything's good by you. Austin Campbell, a familiar name and a familiar face. Mark Wellington, Mike. Oh my God, the people, they're all here. This is great. Hey, Austin. Hey, Mark. Hey, Mike. Hey, Andy. Hey, other Mike. Oh, this is great. This is great. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Jan Klyer. Oh, yeah, you know what? My levels weren't perfect, and then I changed them, and now they're perfect. But thanks for the confirmation. I really appreciate it. That's great. Oh, John Ag is here all the way in Australia. What a perfect start to a perfect Sunday. Hope everyone's having a great Sunday. It's not as cold here as it is in Chicago. Jeff levels. Ooh, there's that transition. It always sneaks up on you. It sneaks up on you like crazy. But hello, everyone. Welcome to Logic Live, episode 128. Very excited to be here. First episode of the new year. Lovely. We have a great show, as always. When don't we have a great show? We always have a great show. But before we get into it, we have a couple messages from a couple of places. So let's get into those messages. This episode of Logic Live is brought to you by AJA. Oh my God. Together with Flame since 2006. If you need BorisFX plugins, you can save 15% on all the BorisFX products, now including the amazing camera tracking program SynthEyes, joining up with all the other products here on the screen, available with a great discount. If you use our affiliate links at the link right here, whoosh, what a great lens flare. Head over to logic.tv/BorisFX and click on one of those links there to lock in that awesome deal. It's pretty chilly out there, and I have my eye on a Logic beanie, but they have been sold out. So if you're like me, keep your eyes peeled, and hopefully you too could be the proud owner of a head warmer. But for now, last I checked, sold out. But we also have t-shirts, stickers, notebooks, AirPod cases, phone cases, and more. You can find the merch store on the logic.tv website. Where would we be without the patrons? I don't think Logic would be here without you, so big shout out to everyone helping to support what makes this right here keep on trucking. Here is our up-to-date Patreon list. I just updated it right before the show. Thank you to everyone on the list. Appreciate all you people. We are clocking in at 158 patrons as of this week. A big thank you to everyone for supporting the community and helping it to grow and to thrive. If you'd like to support what we're doing here on Logic, there are a few bonus perks, most notably the post-show Q&A, where in this case, after the show, we're heading over to Zoom to chat some more with Randy, ask him some questions one-on-one, some of the comps he did on the show. We'll be able to cover anything that we didn't have time to cover here today. So head on over to patreon.com/LogicTV and support for as little as $5 a month. If you haven't heard about it already, let's have a quick chat about Logik Academy Pro, which will definitely be a conversation point on today's episode to just fill in some gaps. If you have some gaps on what it is, Logik Academy Pro is the subscription-based learning platform to connect you with a handful of diversely skilled instructors with the goal of helping to level up your flame skills. There's some pretty legitimate search features, a la carte course purchasing, robust calendar features, and the latest and greatest, we'll talk about this a little bit more, is the mobile app for iPhone and Android, which is an incredible achievement. I'm not sure what goes into that, but Randy pulled it off. But we are... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back for a second. But we are gathered here today to talk about the Comp Club. Every week, Randy posts an assignment, which is essentially a shot that you might expect to see in a normal flame job. And anyone can choose to do the shot, submit it, get feedback on what you did, and whether Randy would, if he were leading that job, give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I've said it before, but I am a huge fan of this concept, and I think it's something that if you don't have available to you through your work in the form of feedback from your team, it's beyond valuable for flame artists of all levels. So a big thank you to current members of Logik Academy Pro, and as a little bonus from Randy, after our normal giveaway for the show, we're giving away 1 month of Logik Academy Pro. So stick around and register for the show if you haven't already, and you might join up the community you might join the community yourself. And now we have some very exciting save the dates coming up. Most notably on the radar, and the one that's right around the corner, is the New York Flame User Group. Back after a little break. I'm almost positive that I'll be there, and so will some of my coworkers, and that's coming this coming Wednesday, January 17th, over in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, Penthouse 45 on 45th Street. I've been there for a few Boris FX events. It's a great space. Very excited for the presentations. They're up on the screen now. Just remember, registration is required. We have 70 signed up already, so it should be a great night. But if you want to be there, make sure you register so we make sure we have space for you. Looking forward to that, and I hope to see you there. And then 3 weeks later, there is another group for those Midwesternly inclined flame artists over in the Chicago area and around. On February 7th, 3 weeks from now. We're looking for a few more artists who would like to present some stuff. So if you'll be there and you want to present something, a spot, a shot breakdown, tips and tricks, workflows, if you have something you'd like to share, there is a forum post up in the forums. So respond to that, or you can email Andy@Logik.tv. Oh my God, I didn't press the button. I've failed my slideshow today. There's the info on the screen on 2/7. If you would like to be a presenter, and Andy has just posted in the chat, there will be beer. So if you were wondering, there will be beer. That is a good confirmation. And just to hype up one more user group on the radar, this one, the details are not quite solidified, but there is an LA user group in the mix eventually for 2024. So that's very exciting. So keep your eyes peeled on that one. And just to hype us up one more time on the user group spirit, here's a quick highlight reel of what you can expect from a Logik user group. This is the Hamburg user group from a few weeks ago. And then there's the Toronto user group. And oh, there's Randy. Look on the right. Shout out and thank you to everyone who showed up to those user groups. And thanks to Randy and Andy for putting it all together, because it is no small task to make it all happen. So thank you to you two, and thank you to everyone for showing up. And now it's time for me to figure out how to get back to, oh, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. Episode 128. Randy was just on the screen a second ago, but speaking of Randy, he is one of the two people, the two founders of Logik, to make all of this possible. So they're a special person. They also happen to be an incredible flame artist. They also happen to be an incredible VFX supervisor, and they also happen to be here right now. So welcome, Randy McEntee.
Hello, hello.
There he is. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely welcome.
Randy was telling me how cold it is. How cold is it right now? Tell the studio audience how cold it is right now.
It's minus all of it. It's like minus 10, minus 30 with wind chill here, Fahrenheit, which is
Fahrenheit.
Yeah. At minus 40, the streams get crossed, and it's the same in Fahrenheit as it is in Celsius. So it's dangerously cold. So it's a pleasure to be inside with you all.
It's a marvel of human ingenuity and that you can be wearing a t-shirt right now, because that just doesn't make sense. Your house must be nice and warm.
I'm using all my computers to heat the house. So,
well, here we are in the first episode of Logik Live 2024. My question, the question on my mind and the question on most viewers' minds right now, did you T-click
how long you have to listen to me?
Did you T-click your New Year's resolution? Because as we all know, if you don't T-click, it doesn't stick.
Yeah, exactly. No, metadata and time code is and tape name is my New Year's resolution.
I'm glad. That's good. But hello and welcome back. I hope you're doing great. You were just here on our last Logik Live,
yes,
which was on a very similar subject. Why don't you fill us in on what's changed and if anything new is happening? Spoiler alert: there are some new things that are happening.
Actually,
on your world.
Yeah. We actually had a really busy holiday season. My kids are older, so and they don't want everything to do with me. So I put a lot of time into a bunch of new content, which is actually just released 9 minutes ago. We just released Flame 201. So last time we were together, we were talking about career paths, and thank you. So Flame 201 is out. It's on the Logik Academy Pro catalog right now, and it represents the first part. There's currently 16 videos, which represent the first part of likely 2, possibly 3 parts, which represents all the start of things that I think Flame Assists ought to know to be at a level corresponding to a Flame Assist. So if you remember last time, we talked about Flame 101 and all the things that you needed to get up and running on Flame, install it and troubleshoot and manage frame stores, the very basics. And so now 201 attempts to bridge the gap and to answer the age-old question of what the heck should I watch and in what order. And so as we communicate with all the people that are new to the platform and new to Flame and Logik, number one question people are asking is, I'm starting, where do I start? And so this is the attempt at answering that question. And so Flame 201 is out now, and we've got class. It's about 6.5 hours of content, and it starts with batch schematics and organizing a little bit, and just getting people in to the very basics. We start with some denoise, some light paint, some light roto, some light stabilization, including 1 point, 2 point, planar, motion vectors, and we just start building this kind of tool set that we can kind of lay this foundation on. So I'm really excited. It was an unbelievable amount of work, several weeks of work. Still wrapping up a little details behind the scenes, but you can check it out now. And the goal is to have a second part. Second part will be more matte extractions and building upon some of the more other things that aren't roto based or green screen based, like GMS tracer and bump maps and maybe some frequency separation and all the other things that we're kind of leaning on as far as making your world a better place and not having to roto everything. So that's the latest on the content for Flame 201.
That's incredible. That is a lot to get through. I mean, as someone who's made tutorials before, like, huge props to you for pulling it off and doing it so quickly. That's a lot. I have a relevant little anecdote. I was talking with a director friend of mine that I'm working on a feature film for, and he was asking, like, we were having small talk while we were working, and he was asking me, like, how do people find out about Flame? Like, how do you know about Flame? And, like, I told him my story, and that is, like, oh yeah, my story is similar to a lot of people's. It's really almost like an apprenticeship. You don't know about Flame going into it. You just happen to find it, and then you learn it on the job. But you're kind of solving that problem a little bit, because he was asking, like, oh, do people go to school for this? That's like a common question. And the answer is typically no, no. But here you are creating the school for this in a way, which I think is incredible. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm just trying to figure out all the things that I wish I had. You know, this was pre-internet when, what was that? The Molson ad on with the kite surfer and the beer ad on a digibeta tape. And, you know, a 30-pound stack of 30-pound book, a manual book that came with every release that we used to prop open doors. Yeah, I mean, I think so Flame has always had three parts to kind of its growing its community. The first is awareness, or, you know, inspiration. You have to kind of care about something before you're interested in it, and then access, and then information or knowledge or school or teaching or training or whatever you want to call it. And so hopefully this bridges that gap. And so it's been a long time in that we've, you know, most of the people that are on the forums and here watching, and most of the people in our community are existing Flame artists, right? And so we've been able to kind of cater to them and serve them and hopefully make their lives better. But now we're trying to extend that love or that guidance or that service, I guess, to people that maybe stumble upon it, which is why we've built Flame 101 and now 201, and we'll wrap up 201, move on to 301, which is about the tools we think you need at a kind of a Flame artist level, and then 401, leading projects, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a massive project, but I think it's worth it. And once we're in this kind of education phase and we can kind of accept, or not necessarily just attract, but just to serve people that have never touched it, that may have heard about Flame or seen it, but are interested and genuinely Flame curious. And so it's a huge part of what we're trying to do. And now with 101 and 201 in place, we can start to think about bigger picture things like educational licensing, because now we actually do have you know, if we can genuinely support these new artists, then we can help solve the other aspect of it, which is the access or the license problem. So that's the kind of ballpark 2024 plan, is to figure out the rest of 201, build 301, and start to figure out what the heck, some kind of licensing system so that people can get access to the tools, and while they access our content.
That's great. And I happen to have the inside info that the licensing was not easy. Let's put it that way. The licensing was not easy.
No,
So
no, no,
it's,
no, no. That's a challenge. That is almost a full-time job.
yeah.
To create a system that not only kind of honors, because it's a big deal, right? We're asking a major corporation to support the community in a way that we'll just say very few others have done previously, and so it's not to be taken lightly. And so we have to show an unbelievable amount of prep and technical backgrounds and reporting and sustainability, right? Because this is not something we can rush into. And so hopefully that comes in calendar year 2024, and we'll see what happens. But the more people kind of consume the content and provide feedback, then that really shapes what we do and where we spend our energy on, because we have limited of all of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the plan for the next, I don't know, 11, 12 months, hopefully.
It's a good plan. It's good to have a plan, and that sounds like a good plan. Tell me a little bit more about the mobile app, because the last we talked,
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
like taking your scissors and cutting the "this is a new thing" sign
Yeah.
in front of the store. The app is
Yeah.
out, and it's been a month. How's that been? Is it
Yeah,
good?
it's really great. I mean, it's the first it's it's the first it's the first app of that services that is for Flame artists, for learning Flame. And I don't know, it's really cool. Like if I had some kind of like adult level scrapbook, that I don't know, that would be in my scrapbook. I think it's kind of cool. So we partnered with Uscreen to create the mobile apps, and so far they've been really well received. We've got about almost have 75 or 80 downloads as of latest. And the thing that's really interesting is the watch count. So people are watching. We've got about 20 hours or so just in the last month or so of people watching from the mobile app, and it just represents a great evolution in kind of the platform, and hopefully just provides value. I know the platform is expensive. It's just there's a lot of stuff under the hood that has to work, and we have to kind of be buttoned up so it provides you guys with the perfect experience, because it can't be bad. And so the mobile app is providing the value so people can have download and offline viewing, download content for watching while they're commuting or traveling. And additionally, there's the push notifications, access to the community, all sorts of kind of just easy fundamental life bettering things that hopefully make it a little easier to survive in our world.
Makes sense, and that's great. You're a trailblazer, and congratulations on that success. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think that might be it for the updates. We got
Yeah,
through that
yeah,
pretty quickly.
that's it for the big updates. I thought we've got a little bit of time today, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about a couple of tools or a couple of things that are commonly that actually I think we all deal with in pretty much every comp, but I don't know if you've ever actually spoken about them on Logic. And we'll see how much time we have, but I want to start with the world's most exciting and romantic topic ever: action surfacing filtering basics.
Wow. Took the words right out of my mouth. Let's
I know,
dive
right?
right in.
I know. It's 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 I'm fully aware of the ridiculousness of that statement, and I'm unfortunately as sober as it comes. But I wanted to
I
kind of
think
talk.
you're in good company here, because I think many people would feel the same way. You know, outside of our industry, no, but in this safe space, yes.
Well, I appreciate this safe, quasi-anonymous space where those of you can roll your eyes at home and spare me of the ridicule and embarrassment. But it's
Oh,
something
oh,
that literally we touch and that we have to deal with on every composite, and it's kind of a, oh, how do I describe it? It's a detail, right? It's an unbelievable detail, but sometimes it really can make the digital world go around for you. And so I just want to kind of quickly run through a few scenarios, open up for questions, see how we get along, and if you're bored to tears, we'll get to the next one. Uh, but I just want to kind of show this because this is probably the next video that we record in the in Flame 201. This will probably be video number 7 or class 17. So I just have a sapphire grid here, and let me try 2-up view. I grew up in 1-up, and I know that the whole tappy thing, and I move crazy weird. So let me try 2-up view for those of you at home. It's my other New Year's resolution besides from 4K.
I was gonna ask, but
Yeah.
I'm here. I'll fight all the people who are fighting you on this one because I am also I grew up with 1-up, so I'm with you. I think we all understand it's better, but it's just hard.
Yeah. It's just like it's like flossing twice a day. It's better for
Yeah,
us. But,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I just have a color source and a sapphire grid, and all I've done is pop into the default settings and change the line width to be 1, and the major line spacing to be 1. I think the default is something different. So that's all we've done. We just have a very basic grid. You could use a checkerboard. You could use any image. You could use anything you want. But I just wanted to kind of walk you through some of the usual things to look out for. So whenever we are moving pixels, which is to say stabilizing, tracking, deforming, bilinear by cubic, x by cubic, scaling, any of that nonsense, as soon as you move a pixel, you kind of then need to filter those new pixels responsibly. And what do I mean? Well, let me show you. So I just have, actually, you know what, we'll do 100 frames. And if I zoom in a lot, you can see we've just got a very basic line. But if I move to 0.5, then you can see how instantly we have something that doesn't look like what we did before. And if I just increment in 0.5 and just go up, you'll see this kind of crawling behavior, right? So it's kind of like normal, weird looking, normal, weird looking, normal, weird looking. And when this happens, you know, often, or when this happens in a comp in live action, sometimes you may not even be able to see it. But with certain things, graphics, design, maybe a wide shot of a cityscape, there is a very good chance that you may not see it, but you could kind of feel this kind of stair-steppy kind of stuff happening. And so, well, what the heck is going on? Well, just like a just like a resize, whenever you change pixels, you have to help Flame determine how it should make up new pixels, right? So it's just like a resize. If you're scaling something up or blowing something up from HD to 4K or whatever, then Flame needs help sometimes determining what's the best way to make up new information. And the default of linear is, well, not. So it's fine for concatenation through a cross. Like unless you move a pixel, it's not going to get soft. But as soon as you change pixels, again, tracking, stabilizing, scaling, sub-pixel animation, warping, bilinear, all that stuff, you kind of need to have the appropriate rendering. And so I am in a dual view because I'm the dual view single 1-up jerk. But if you are single, then I just want you to kind of call this to your attention. So there's 2 modes down here. And if yours looks different than mine, then just toggle back and forth. And the other one is what mine looks like. So under single view, under the rendering, there's these options here, which, it's frustrating because Flame does a great job of giving you the word for things, but sometimes I kind of wish it didn't and just gave you the phrase that, like, the I don't know, a word that's easier than anisotropic, because unless you're a Wikipedia, you've never heard of that. But let me kind of walk you through, and I'll switch back to dual only because my muscle memory is taking me here. So the actually, I think you really should Wikipedia some of this because it's fascinating. But I'll give you the TLDR, the too long didn't read version. And so whenever we're doing sub-pixel animations of things that are facing camera, or as in like aren't heavily rotated, then 98% of the time, EWA plus linear is an appropriate response. And I'll kind of show you why. Um, EWA and linear, for all you tech monkeys, is elliptical weighted average. And elliptical weighted average it's a math formula. The very most basic fundamental thing is, I don't know the technicalness of it, but the basics of it is that what it does is that it takes, for every pixel, let's just say this is a pixel here that it wants to do, right? It takes a randomly oriented ellipse, hence elliptical. So let's just say for this pixel right there, it takes a randomly oriented ellipse and then picks 2 points or picks various points on that and weights the average and interpolates new pixels or new information randomly and assigns that to your new pixel in texture space. And texture space is a weird word that just means the viewport. And so it's just the way to fundamentally interpolate new pixels when you have this kind of subpixel stuff. So if we can see that my linear does this creepy crawly thing as it animates left to right, if we switch it to EWA and linear, it doesn't. It looks okay. It does when I'm zoomed in 1636%, but it provides the best way of animating pixels with non-integer values, if that makes sense. So whenever we're doing tracking, stabilizing, scaling, warping, 98 times out of 100, EWA and linear is the way to go. And I'll show you another kind of more egregious answer. A lot of times if we rotate these things, look, I just already got out of my 2-up view, Jeff. I'm fired. If
Baby
we,
steps.
oh, for sure. If we go back to our original, and I'll just set this at 100, and you can see what happens when we rotate things. And this is where we get in trouble a lot. And when you're doing compositing tasks, sometimes rotating textures like this mean, and I'm at 100% here, but look, this line is rotated, this 1 pixel line is rotated so much that right now it's disappearing. And that's a problem. If we're laying a new floor or a grid and we're tracking something and it moves, you can see this is the kind of nonsense or garbage that we unfortunately need to own. And let me just play this. Can you guys kind of see that crawling at home? Is that kind of apparent through the compression?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty clear. On my end, I can see that. I think everyone else can see what I'm seeing.
Cool. So for surfaces that are rotated a lot, then 98 times out of 100, anisotropic plus linear is the way forward. And I'll switch back to one of these. Let's see if it is or not. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but typically anisotropic and linear gives you a better result. Now, sometimes these things they just do that, and it's impossible to kind of cope. But actually, this is one of those times where it doesn't. EWA and linear looks better. So this is a tricky kind of solution to find, and on top of this, you might need to go back and rethink your compositing strategy so that you don't have to deal with a lot of these wiggly jiggly ugly things. But the rule of thumb is EWA and linear most of the time for these kinds of moves like this. And then when things are rotated heavily against the camera, most of the time anisotropic and linear for the win there. And toggling back and forth and seeing which one works. Plus, going back to the original, obviously we have the benefit of making our lines thicker. But if you're in a position where you're able to do that either through a node or matte blur or matte edges, then those can be kind of helped in this way as well. Now, if this doesn't get you anywhere, which it almost always does. In fact, I can't tell you the last time I laid a grid like this, and this is obviously the world's worst case scenario. But what's important to start, it's important to start with these rendering, these surface filtering types, because most of the time what people will do instead is they'll reach for software anti-aliasing. And should we do a quick little cover of software anti-aliasing?
Absolutely.
My third favorite subject. So Software anti-aliasing is designed to fix problems such as this. Okay, we have a huge Logic Live, and if we change the scale, I'm fired again, Jeff. If
It's okay.
we if we change this client provided artwork and scale it way down, we can see that it gets really crispy and crunchy and looks just terrible. And if we switch the rendering type from linear to EWA and linear, you can see instantly we are looking way, way, way better. And in fact, now we're starting to see individual pixels. We're zoomed in 600%. This is good enough for TV if that was our eventual logo, right? Instead, what happens a lot, which is not correct, is that people will leave this on linear and will reach back to node preferences and start cranking anti-alias samples. Now, you can get there in the end, right? However, let's talk a little bit about my third favorite subject, anti-aliasing. And anti-aliasing is defined as rendering the scene n times, where n is the number of samples, okay, at a offset or in a distance as defined by the softness. Okay, let me show you a quick example. So here I have this Logic Live. It was huge. I've scaled it way down. Let's do anti-aliasing of 2. When I hit preview, it's tough to see right now, but Logic Live has been rendered twice. And it's been rendered twice at an offset, or the pixels have been moved by a distance equal to the softness, which in this case is 1. If I make this 10, you'll see that now we've got 2 samples that are 10 pixels apart. And when I render them, we have 2 Logic Lives. If I go to 4, we've got 4. If I go to 5, they're now 5 distance apart. If I go to 30, they're now 30 pixels apart. Okay? And so 9 times out of 10, we don't want something that looks like this. We want something that looks like this. But the anti-aliasing is bad for 2 reasons. One, your 1 minute render just multiplied by the number of samples. So if a 1 minute render, you go to 2 samples, it's now 2 minutes. If you go to 16, it's now 16 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's rendering the scene it's rendering the scene more. And that's obviously not great. The other challenge is that it's happening at the entire scene, meaning if you have a background in this shot, it's going to soften the background. And we don't want to do that. We very rarely ever want to do that. Therefore, you should always start with filtering correctly first to get you as close as possible to non-gross, crispy looking images. And then once you kind of have that sorted, it's almost, I don't know if I've ever used anti-aliasing for this. 9 times out of 10, a media level blur is the way forward. In this case, we'll blur the front. And most of the time, with a small graphic and a big frame, that's going to be typically fine. It's super fast to render, and it only happens at the media level surface level, not the entire level of the action composite. Does that make sense so far?
I think it makes great sense. And I would add one tiny little clarification. I think, and I love your explanation, and I love how you've put it and what you've described. Maybe a nice other way to look at it also is when you have a graphic in an action that's crunchy, you want to mess with the settings for that one graphic. You don't really want to mess with, because there could be a couple other things in that action. But when you go into the node prefs and anti-aliasing, you're messing with the whole action. But when you go into the filtering for the surface, you're messing with the one surface. And that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think for the longest time, and yours truly, myself included, we haven't known some of these things, so we've been bypassing them with shrink or dealing with mattes, fixing at the importing matte level. which is fine until you can't, or until it's not an applicable solution. One other thing I wanted to talk about as well is um, the other contributing factor of some of this kind of crispy looking graphics sometimes is my fifth favorite subject of all time, pre-multiplication and unpremultiplication. And that might actually be worth talking briefly about now too, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. There were a couple of questions that popped in that I
Oh
think you
yes.
may have answered, but I think Maury was talking about how multi-sampling helps, but I'm not sure if that is what you were talking about in the node prefs with the anti-aliasing.
Oh, I'm not.
We
I'm
can
not.
we can clarify.
I'm not familiar with quote unquote what multi-sampling is. Is that the anti? Is that Maury? You're talking about anti-aliasing set to multiple numbers? Is that right?
Maybe he'll answer. And then Michael Landon had a question about if filtering is off in action preferences. I'm not sure if he meant the filtering in the view settings or if he was talking about the
Ah,
action prefs.
let's see. So there's another kind of world where, yeah. So view under the view preferences, Mr. Land is talking about filtering here, and I've almost always the default is on that filtering is on, and I think I've always had filtering on. That's just kind of the way my brain has worked. But every once in a while, turning this off can help you see the individual pixels more like this. Um, and that's kind of what this filtering button does. So you can see here, literally with filtering off, I can see these individual pixels and have a slightly more um, bad word, transparent view of what's happening under the scene.
Yeah.
Uh, but I've always learned filtering. I guess I've always had it on, and I know about the button, but I've always worked with it on. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Landon, but knowing what is happening and being able to look at the actual pixels at that pixel level is available to you when turning filtering off in the view submenu under image.
Yeah. And for me, a small detail that my mentor always like reinforced, and I think it's another important factor, is it's the scaling thing. And I think that has to do with the view filtering you were just looking at. If
Mhm.
you want to look at what you're working on accurately, it's always great to go back to 100%. Like you can go into the nitty gritty at 800% as much as you want, but at the end of the day, what you're rendering is 100%. So it's always important to look back into that.
Yes. So this is the other. So yes. Thank you for leading me into the next question, next area of topic. So keeping your viewer at 100% is the best way at judging what's happening in your screen. Right now, this is a 4K image, and I'm using a 4K monitor. And so sometimes that's not always possible to do at the entire for an entire composite. So just know that as soon as you change this to be not 100, your viewport is potentially adding complications in the in your pixel peeping.
It's
So
resampling.
I mean, yes, it has to at some point. So just know that there's all these different factors that you kind of need to know where those light switches are so that you can make informed decisions about what's going on and what's good enough for your situation. Most of the time, these, like back in the day, we used to worry about all these masters, and then they'd go to a closed caption and get run through a freaking composite VTR deck to put analog closed captioning on it, and it went down a degradation or went down a level of compression or whatever that used to be called. So it's all relative, but having that fundamental understanding so that when it matters, you can go home on time is helpful.
Yeah, and I mean to mirror that, Andy just wrote something very nice that I'll put up on the screen, and I feel the exact same way because I'll be honest and I'll be transparent. I am a node settings anti-aliasing jumped up to 6 times whenever I run
Mm,
into that problem kind of guy,
yeah.
and that's where episodes like this are so awesome because it's like you can everyone just kind of I think it's hard to dig into all the details for all the nodes all the
Oh,
times. And it's easy just to find a solution that works and do that forever without
yes,
really thinking too much about it. And if your
yes,
render times aren't that bad, then it's not something you'll ever think about. But if they're really
yeah,
bad, you wouldn't know that this is a problem until you saw this episode or learned about this. So this is great.
yeah. And I mean, the other kind of real world impact that this can have is in hardware purchasing decisions, right? So graphics cards matter, computers matter, this versus that, and this versus that, all that matters. And if you are hitting different, let's see what's the analogy I want to fly here. If you're using too big of a hammer or an inappropriately sized hammer, um, you're going to have a bad time. And throwing extra GPU cycles at a problem which could have been solved with switching from linear to EWA and average. I mean, like that's a thing that happens, and it's unfortunate. But understanding all these factors, the surface filtering, the anti-aliasing at the scene level, the dealing with things at the media level, including blurs and pre-blurs and post-blurs and edge wraps and edge blurs, plus little thing, actually bigger things like hardware anti-aliasing. We haven't talked about that yet. All of those contribute to an experience, right, for yourself as well as your show. And the better you can craft that, the better.
Agreed. And I'm glad you touched on hardware. Is it worth it to dive into hardware at all? And then we have one little question from Carlos that we can get to as well if we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's let me just briefly talk about hardware anti-aliasing, and then we will jump into Carlos's question straight away. So, hardware anti-aliasing is great. It's also rough. So, let me rephrase. It's also not great. So, hardware anti-aliasing is available to you within the batch preferences submenu. And this machine is a Threadripper Pro with an RTX A6000 that on board supports X number of real time hardware anti aliasing. So when we were in the action node preferences, hither, talking about software anti aliasing, this is a rendering the scene n number of times and creating the result that way. The hardware anti aliasing, thanks to gamers, graphics cards, they have built-in hardware level anti-aliasing features designed to make video games look better. So your Fortnite, your Call of Duties, your all the games that kids are playing these days, the gaming cards have built-in hardware anti-aliasing because obviously you don't have you don't have time to wait for your 120 frames a second to render n number of times to make your your avatar look good, right? So they use hardware anti-aliasing. Now, the tricky thing about hardware anti-aliasing is it's different for every graphics card. So my RTX A6000 is going to behave different than my RTX 6000, which will be different amongst graphics cards. Additionally, and you know what? I'm going to say something. Someone in the chat, please call me out if I'm wrong. I think it's not saved with your batch schematic. I think it's separate entirely from your saved batch iteration. Therefore, it does complicate things when returning to something some other time or burning where you're working locally and burning remotely. It is a imprecise, ill-shaped hammer at solving that problem. I'm not sure if I'm kind of explaining that clearly, but that's kind of my
I
take on
think
it.
so. Is it just another? It's just an so like if the software anti-aliasing makes you render that action X number
Mhm.
more times, does hardware anti-aliasing make you render the whole batch X number of times? Or is it a different way of using the graphics
Yes.
cards stuff?
Actually, it is. Oh, I'm not sure. It's a good question. It might be. I mean, it's at the whole level, right? And so it might jank up everything. It might literally, like any transform, happen more, and I need to dig on that. And the reason I don't know about it is because I've never used it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, here's the funny thing. When I run into a batch problem, the first thing I look for is that, and sometimes it magically gets turned on, and I can't figure out why. And that's
yeah.
a big problem point for me. That's why my batches
Yeah.
are slow sometimes.
Yes. So that's actually a really good point. When I'm inheriting other people's work, that is one of the top 5 things that I will check to see if it is on or off. And if it's on, I'll know that something is juicy. 2, I need to kind of look carefully and see where I can optimize because someone at some point didn't have a good experience with the scene. And it's up to me to figure out, unpack that a little bit so that I can own it kind of responsibly. Yeah, I've never used hardware anti-aliasing. I've never leaned on it for a variety of reasons, and this is probably because when it first was introduced, I was at a really big studio with a variety of hardware from K6000s, P6000s to deprecated graphics cards and all that shebang. So it was frowned upon only because of a lack of consistency when sharing setups among artists. If you're by yourself, check it out, lean on it. Just know those might be things to look out for, and go from there.
Okay, we have let's do 30 seconds on motion blur. I thought it was just the samples, but is motion blur in action affected by both samples and the anti-aliasing? Do we know? Is that
Yeah.
for Carlos's? Oh, it is. Wow.
Yes, it is. So in shameless self-promotion, in Flame 201 class 15 or 16, I talk about motion blur. And motion blur, very briefly, is in the same category of tools, right? And it is impacted similarly by motion blur. And motion blur is, once you talk about anti-aliasing, then motion blur has the same kind of switches or controls, right? Things you need to own. And so a sample of motion blur is nothing more than a temporal number of drawn images, right? Where the shutter is defined as the distance in which either an object or the camera travels in relation to something else. So it's just like anti-aliasing, and you've got to be really smart. So a shutter of 0.25 means the distance between these is small, but the samples, or the number of times it's rendered, is defined as n, or the number of samples. And for all you I don't get out much, so I see an unbelievable amount of really crappy motion blur happening out there, especially on like what I think are After Effects types of projects. And you see the kind of stair-steppy garbage that is stuff like this. And we talk a lot about that in Flame 201. And but yeah, the motion blur is the same story as anti-aliasing. You have to be really careful, because when we are working on images seen through a camera, which is practically all the time, then you need to own and understand motion blur, and the number of samples needs to be dealt with responsibly so that you can not render your scene more than you need to. Because on this RTX A6000, I can render this 60 times. If I render it 30 times, it looks pretty good. So knowing that and being responsible, knowing what those buttons do, is important. And therefore, if I were just to render this, it's compounded by anti-aliasing, right? So if this is 10 frames and that takes that much long to render with with anti-aliasing of 1, if I go to 64, hit render again, it's going to render 64 times longer than it just did. So yeah, motion blur, depth of field, all those things are important in knowing what does what.
Great explanation, great demonstration. I think it's time for your 6th favorite topic, pre-multiplication versus un-pre-multiplication. Or which number is that? I don't remember. I've lost track.
I don't know. I've lost track too, because it's hard for me to keep track of my lies sometimes. Here we go. So And the reason I was kind of inspired to talk about this a little bit is that recently on our Discord server, we've had a lot of artists that are not new to compositing but new to Flame, and they're kind of dealing with a lot of the Flame type issues that Flame and Flame artists. How should I say this? Politely. Uh, you don't have to know a lot about compositing to be a decent Flame artist. um, that might be kind of controversially stated, but Flame is so good and so fast at helping you achieve things without necessarily knowing all the fundamentals. It's a high speed compositor. And therefore, there's a lot of things that we've inherently found solutions for that nuke artists, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. There's things that Flame artists have only recently found out in their careers, me included, that nuke artists are kind of faced with solving almost every day. And the biggest one, and it's the worst named feature of compositing ever, is pre-multiplication versus unpremultiplication. And what do I mean? Well, I have a couple of solids here. I have a black frame, a cyan frame, and a G mask with some softness. And we're all familiar with receiving elements and having to kind of composite them over things. And I just want to kind of walk through that a little bit in some very basic fundamental troubleshooting things that you can have in your toolkit so that your world's a better place. And it's a subtle one, but I think it's important. So, um, especially I've found this a lot in kind of recent either AI or other quote unquote non-traditional graphics and logos being made, because they're being faked. They're not being made exclusively in Illustrator or Photoshop, and the math is sometimes wonky. That's been my anecdotal experience. So let me show you what I mean. Um, we're going to call this a graphic, I know, and we're going to call this its matte, and we're going to composite that over a different background, and we're just going to call it blue. And so if we do that and we don't treat it well, then we get crummy looking edges. And those edges can be either filtering problems, or sometimes they can be, in fact, pre-multiplication or, okay, let me back up 1 second. Pre-multiplication should just be called multiplied. I don't know why it's called pre, and I don't know why unpremultiplied is called unpremultiplied. When in third grade, you learn about division, which is the inverse or the opposite of multiplication. So I don't know why it should just be called divided. It shouldn't be called unpremultiplied. It should be called divided. And if we just stick to those phrases in our heads, then in reality, the solutions will become much more apparent. So this is a image that we have composited. And again, it's this, which is pre-multiplied on black. It's alpha over a blue background. And you can see when we composite it, we get this crappy black edge. And you can see here that it's kind of gross. And the reason we have that is a couple of reasons. And first, I also want to talk a little bit about being able to look and spot a properly pre-multiplied image just by looking at its matte and fill. And the way I like to do that is with the difference matte. And there's going to be other ways too, but this is kind of my natural pause point. So whenever I receive client supplied artwork, I take a pause and I bring it in and I look at its matte and its fill, the two separate parts of composite. And I look at them and I dissect them a little bit. And here's what I try to do. I zoom in a little bit, maybe I gamma up a little bit. And my goal is to toggle back and forth between the matte and the fill. And if the matte has transparency, which it does, right? There's parts of it that are fully white, and there's parts of it that are approaching zero or black. And if the fill does the same, 0, 1, 1, which is cyan, which is fully there's no transparency, and as there's transparency toward the edges, then I can denote or determine that this is a multiplied image. It's a pre-multiplied image. Therefore, when I composite it in Flame downstream, I need to tell action, comp nodes, etc., that it's pre-multiplied. And when I do that, it's composited correctly. When it's not done correctly, we get this black edge. When I state that this is a pre-multiplied image, it then gets composited correctly. Does that make sense so far?
I think it makes sense.
So whenever you're dealing with pre-multiplication, multiplication challenges, I always start with something that I've made that I can control, and then running that through my pipeline so I can check things and make sure the math is right. So if we were to receive this asset, let's just say this actually, if we receive this asset, which is a fill, and this asset, which is a mat, if we wanted to multiply them together or pre-multiply them, then all we have to do is take a comp node and render that pre-multiplied. Okay, so that's pre-multiplied. So now this is a pre-multiplied image that we can composite. If we want to unpre-multiply it, we just turn on unpre-multiplied. And you can see here now the fill or the RGB has zero transparency. It goes from off to on at every step. I'm sorry, it goes from off to on instantly, right? There's not a pixel in there that has any transparency in it. That is a that is a unpre-multiplied, aka divided, aka straight for some Adobe people, asset. So if we wanted to composite this over a new background, we'll just make that blue again. Okay, that's the background, that's the mat. Now it knows that it's unpre-multiplied because it is. The fill is that, and now it's composited correctly. And if we get it wrong, we can see it's really wrong, and it's not a composite that respects our transparency of our mat. So, long story short, sometimes edges, whether it be filtering, can actually be, or filtering edge issues can also be because the image itself may or may not be set up to be read in its correct state, or the tools are expecting but receiving a difference or a mismatch in the types of graphics that's being supplied.
Good explanation. I like it. I have to say I employ some of the techniques here of checking the client supplied at Matt
You
and Phil.
do?
Yeah, that's common. And a funny little connection to all of this is I wonder how, and I don't want to go into it because we don't have that much time left. But it's a fun little connection of I wonder how aliasing affects mats in other programs and such, and how that would kind of make the pre-multiplied versus not pre-multiplied issue compounded in any way. But another issue for another time maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the only little mint on that pillow would be all of these discussions on on anti-aliasing and motion blur is relevant in the GMask tracer as well, because the GMask tracer is under the hood a full 3D roto and keying environment, not just not it's a mimics actions capabilities, and so Gmasks, roto, keying, gradients, all of those are accessible with the same kind of tools, whether it be a motion blur and anti-aliasing, and not so much to filtering, but blur is another component of the Gmask creation process as well. And I know that's also a kind of a common theme when people are, or when artists are complaining that or stating that the quality of the original Gmask node is better than the Gmask tracer. That's because the Gmask tracer is a 3D compositing environment, which then owns some of these additional challenges, hence anti-aliasing and all that, which is not available in the old Gmask. God, I hope it's not, or I just lied. Did I lie?
It's okay. This is only recorded forever.
There's only 20 people watching. Oh yeah, so I'm right. So there is motion blur, but no anti-aliasing because the old GMass tracer is not a 3D environment, so therefore it doesn't know about anti-aliasing. It only uses motion blur. Okay, I was mostly right. Okay,
You were mostly right. That's the
Mostly
theme of today's show. Randy?
mostly right.
Yeah.
Abby, I was mostly right today. Sorry, my wife likes to know when I'm mostly right.
Nice. This was great. The audience loves it. I know that we had at least one question from Shannon that she agreed that she'd ask in the patrons chat afterwards because
Okay.
we're pretty much out of time. Are you happy with what you covered? There was nothing else that you wanted to get through? I mean, we are at the 3 o'clock time, so
I somehow managed to talk 45 minutes on those topics. I think we're good.
time flies when you're talking about something you love. Isn't that right?
Jeez, I need to go outside more.
No, you're in good hands here. You're in a good community. But thanks for the show. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for filling us in on what's new on Logik Academy Pro. I'll see you over in the patrons chat.
Cheers. Thanks.
Great. Thanks to Randy. I think we all know what time it is. It's time to give something away. Okay, we'll ignore what we just saw there. Here we are. We're the Logik Live wheel of giving things away. What are we giving away, Jeff? Oh, we're giving away 1 free month of Logik Academy Pro. Who's going to be the lucky winner of 1 free month of Logik Academy Pro? It's none other than David Kreitz, a household name. Congratulations, David. Logik Academy Pro, 1 month. But wait, there's more. We're going to give away a year subscription to Boris FX Optics. Who is the lucky winner of that? Let's find out. None other than Johnny Ames. Congratulations. Congratulations. Congrats, everybody. We're back to the slideshow. Coming up on Logik Live, we're still ironing out some details for the next few shows, so stay tuned and keep your eyes peeled on what's coming up. Boop. There it is. If you haven't already signed up with the forum, head on over and do so at forum.logik.tv. While you're there, sign up and head on over to the Logik Discord. We're having some of our more informal chats and hangouts. We have a relatively new episode of Logik Podcast. Glenn had a chat with John Hollis, flame artist, director, and musician. He's been doing this a long time and has a great attitude, and it was pretty awesome to hear his story, and maybe you'll feel the same. We are clocking in at 2,110 subscribers here on YouTube, and my New Year's resolution is 2560 by 1440. So let's see if we can get to 2560, shall we? The number keeps growing, but the goalpost is always moving. So, of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button on your screen now. If you'd like to support what we're doing here on Logik, please become a patron by signing up at patreon.com/LogikTV. We didn't give out any swag today, so if you're feeling swaggy, be sure to head over to the merch store to pick up your own Logik merch. A big thank you to Boris FX for sponsoring Logik Live. If you want to save 15% on all of their offerings, you can head on over to logik.tv/BorisFX. Click on those links to take advantage of the awesome savings. And a final thank you to AJA for also sponsoring Logik Live. They've been together with Flame since 2006. And that brings us to the end. Thank you to everyone. Let's cue the music. Thank you to Randy yet again for rushing home from a shoot that he didn't tell us about, but he's always moving. He's not out of here yet, though. He's heading over to Zoom to take part in the patrons Q&A to dig a little bit deeper, answer some more questions. I'll see the patrons over there. But for now, thanks again to everyone for being here. I appreciate you all. Thank you all on the first episode of 2024. And I'll see you next time on Logik Live.